Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in again. As you can see, the truck is jacked up in the air. Ghostly Rich is on the ground, already crawling around getting things ready, because what we're doing today is installing these. And these are the extended brake lines from Z1 Offroad. Basically, if you watch the channel, Richard and myself lifted the truck. It works out to about 3 inches of lift. Anything more than that, you'll definitely need these, but 3 inches, you'll see in a minute, the stock ones are pretty much maxed out. So I picked up these. Comes with everything you need to install, including nuts, bolts, and your little copper washers. I'll show you where all that goes in a few minutes. And then the only other thing you need is brake fluid. The truck takes .3. You do not need this jumbo bottle. You will go through a little bit, but the store only had the jumbo bottle. So this will be way more than we need, but it's better to have too much than not enough. So we already got the one on. Once I get one of the rear ones off, we'll match up lengthwise so you guys can see that. But for right now, we'll go over here and we'll show you what to do first. And now before you start any of this, what you want to do is on this truck, your reservoir is on the driver's front. So you want to do shortest lines first because you're going to bleed the system as you go. You don't have to put them all on and then bleed everything. You can do it as you go. So what you want to do, driver's front first, second shortest, driver or passenger front, third would be the driver's rear, and fourth, passenger rear. So go in that order and you can bleed them all at once. All right, so your front brake line is right here where Ghostly Rich is showing us, and you can see why we're going to do this. If he cranks the wheel over as if you were turning, you can see just how tight that gets. Now this is jacked up, this is full droop on the suspension, but it's able to do that off-road. So if you're already this tight, you can see it's tight enough where it almost kinks the hose even on the bottom. So that's what I mean by you're pretty much maxed out on what you're gonna do here. So first things first, to get this off, get yourself a bucket or something underneath to catch the fluid. Up here on the top where Ghostly Rich is, it's a 10mm bolt. The other side was a bit of a pain in the butt to do. Yep. Chances are you're going to strip the bolt. So what we did, get yourself a channel lock or a pair of pliers like this, clamp it and just break it. So he'll pull and you'll hear it snap here. Just like that. You might mess up the threads just a bit, but it's going to be a lot less damage than if you keep on stripping the bolt basically with the wrench. And then you can see it's super loose after that. So you can keep turning it. It will start dripping eventually, so don't unthread it completely just yet, but at least it's loose and you can start undoing the top. And then as for the little clip that's holding this thing in place, needle nose pliers, crimp it, give it a little wiggle, pull outwards, and it'll come right off. What it is a little clip of the hump there. It's basically just held on by pressure. So wiggle it out and it'll come straight out. And then for the bottom portion, 12 mil. The new one going in is 14, but the one stock on the truck is 12. So break it loose. And as it comes loose, you will see the fluid start to drip out. Once we loosen it in the loosening position, instead of making it tighter, you can see right away it'll start dripping. So side note, your reservoir is right over there. You can see we still got plenty in there. Make sure you keep it topped up, because if it goes down, especially once you start bleeding the brakes, you're gonna start sucking in air instead of keeping the fluid in, and you definitely do not want that. And now you can see, once it's off, the little copper washer that dropped, make sure that's not stuck on anything, and you can loosen the top and the whole thing will pop out. We can get the new one in place right away. So this is your front line. You can see we've got it lined up top, and lengthwise you gain probably 2, maybe 2.5 inches in length. So more than enough, and you won't have to worry about anything binding or cracking. They are a little bit thinner. It also shouldn't flex as much as a rubber hose. Some people say they can feel the difference in the braking. We'll see if I notice anything once it's all done. But lengthwise for the fronts is about 2.5 inches. And then before you make a complete mess, start threading the top on. You can see it splashing on the lower control arm there. So you get the top on, it's still going to leak. It's basically just going to go through the hose down to the bottom, but at least then it's dripping closer to your catch can or whatever you're using to get the fluid. And then if you notice, what Ghostly Rich is trying to do here right now is there's two little notches in there, and that nut actually fits just in between. So there's one on the right hand side, one on the left hand side. So now when you tighten it up, it stops the nut from turning, and it also allows that to go up high enough to re-put that clip on to hold it all in place. And then once you got that clip in place, get yourself a rubber mallet and just give it a few love taps and it'll pop it into place. Don't use a big hammer. If you do, tap very nicely, because one, you don't want to bend that clip at all, and two, if you're not very good aim, you're hitting your brand new brake line with a hammer, which is a no-no.
Banjo, copper. Make sure it's as clean as you can have it. Goes in through this side. Next copper. Important. Make sure that the other copper fell off. You do not want to accidentally have two copper banjos on there, other banjo washers. Otherwise you will cry. Go ahead, do this. Bring this over. As you can see, if you can, a little bit upward motion. The reason why is I just find that the bend is nicer. See how it's got a bigger bend away? This is good because then you know it's not going to get kinked up beside your tire. Now, inch pounds, 110, and get that done, and then we'll just tighten up this fitting.
And then, as you can see, dot 3, we let the front there drip while we change the front. You do lose a little bit, so definitely before you bleed them, you want to just top it off. Keep it filled. It's better to have too much than not enough, because like I said, if you suck in air, you're gonna have to do the whole thing right over again. All right, so to bleed the brakes, all you gotta do is take off your little rubber nipple right here. It pulls straight off. Once that's off, you got your little silver nipple. Now, Ghostly Rich has a fancy little bottle here that, if you have one, you basically just cram it in the end there, and then the bottle itself has a cap and a little hose that goes inside to the bottom. You want to have a little bit of fluid in there, so when you're bleeding these, you're not going to suck air backwards through this thing accidentally. So now you can break it just like he did, just like any other way of bleeding brakes. If you don't have the bottle, you can watch another video for that. I'm not going to go over it in this video, but basically what we can do now is pump the brakes, and you'll see the fluid coming through there a little bit already.
Pump it 3 times. Okay, actually do 2 more. One more time. See, no more air bubbles. Now seal it and you're done.
And then you can see after we did the driver's front, you use up a bit. It's not a whole bunch, but you definitely will need some. And then again, don't get any air in there, because we're gonna go for a test drive after. And as you can see by the view down there, Ghostly Rich lives at the top of the hill. So when we go for a test drive, we definitely want these things to work. And one last thing with the brake fluid, we have the cap off. It's just sitting right here. If it's pouring rain or anything is going on, 0 water in here. You do not want water getting in here, or the bottle. Don't leave the bottle sitting out in the rain, because if you mix water in here, you basically have to drain the entire thing, refill it, flush it all out, because the water does not mix with the fluid. So if you get any in there, that's a really bad situation. You don't want that happening. But luckily for us, it's overcast, not raining. But again, if it was raining at all, especially with the hood up, you don't want any chance of something dripping and splashing into there. So no water. All right, so now that everything's back together and tight, you can see it's bent away from everything. You do not want it to be kinked that direction, because not only is your wheel there, but then it's going into all your suspension components, your springs, your control arms, everything. And keep in mind, for the top part that stays close, get a file. If you feel anything rough on there, just lightly file, get any burrs and anything like that off, because then if by chance it happens to touch it all, you're not going to be damaging the line at all. It's just going to slide over. All right, so it's a little bit harder to get a view under here, but now that the wheel's back on, you can see the brake line there. And like I said, it's going away from your tire. And then I'll come up and it tightens up right there. So it's not going to be hitting anything. It's away from anything that moves and may crush it or may rub it and wear a hole over time. So again, you want it to be away from everything. Just make sure everything's orientated in the right direction and it should be all right. All right, now that the front is done, moving on to the driver's rear, or passenger rear in our case. Your brake line is right here. This will be your nozzle to bleed it, just the same as we did the front. But you can see this is your little angle. So if you're to take your new one, it's gonna sit like that and come out. And it basically comes out. You can see it wrap around. You have one extra clip right here that holds the slack. That's what that little piece is for on the new one. So you'll have to take that clip off, put it back on when you're done. And then it comes all the way up. And again, you got your other clip right up here. Hopefully you can see it. Which of course you couldn't see it, so back underneath, but basically you pull out your clip and you'll have your little nut that we broke loose with the pliers there again on the top. So we'll do that, get the new one in place, and then it's the same as before. Just basically get it to line up the same direction. You can see the slack is going towards the back, and then of course the other part is going to be the same length. That's why they have the clamp already on there in place where it's got to go. All right, so Ghostly Rich has the driver rear done. As you can see, we got the bottle hooked up, and you can see just by gravity, it's already forcing the air out of here. So now we can go pump the brake a few times, make sure you don't have any of that. Once you get solid fluid, almost like it's doing on its own right now, that's what you're looking for. But definitely pump, because you will end up with a little bit here and there of air inside the line still. All right, so we got one of the rears off, and as you can see your extra length here. Quite a bit longer on the rear, which is where we needed it most anyways. And then of course your little bracket there is just slightly different as well. So you gain maybe 2 inches on the part from the caliber to the first clip, and then you probably gain another 4 or 5 from the actual length going up to the brake line itself. All right, so then the back is pretty much the same as the front. Right here is your bleeder. The line comes underneath, and you can see clips right there, goes up top, clips right there. Richard's working on the other side. It's a little bit more of a pain to get out this top clip on the other side because for some reason it's way over here, like you guys saw, close to the edge. So other than getting your hands in there, it's not too bad, but it's just an awkward spot to get to. But again, once you get it off, it's as simple as just tightening that back up, put your clip in here, bolt it back down, make sure you got your crush washers on both sides, tighten it all up, 120 foot-pounds on the rear as well, and it's just as easy as the front, and that's how it should look. You want the slack to go to the back, and then this slack to come outwards, so keep everything away from the actual rear end of the truck. All right, so passenger side is a little bit different. Like I said, the actual connection is right here, right up against the frame. A little bit of a pain to get at, but once you get it in, it's as simple as coming around and bolting it back into place. And if you notice, we pointed these down. They were coming out to the side before. Reason for that is it wanted to flex and go towards the shock on this side. The other side doesn't matter because your shock's on the opposite side, it's over there. But for this side, it wanted to rub, and there was almost too much slack here. But what we found, if you pull this little rubber gasket out of here, you can actually move it up and down the line. So now we just have to find the sweet spot, and basically we're eating up all the slack on this side so it doesn't rub on anything. It'll sit up about like that. So it's not too tight. And between that clip and the caliper itself, nothing moves. There's no flex there, so it's all as one part going up and down. Whereas now you have all the extra slack where you need it. So Richard's going to do the same on the other side. You can see it looks much tighter over there. So once we adjust it, it'll look the same as this. But those spacers are not quite in the right spot. But once we get it into place, you'll have all the slack where you need it, and you won't have to worry about it rubbing up against anything else.
The biggest advantage to those new lines is, see how it's crimped and this won't slide? Well, in the case of an emergency, if you needed a little bit more, let's say this isn't slid all the way through that grommet, it'll actually either pull the rubber out of this grommet and give you that full line, which is nice. In this case, because this is a crimped piece, all you've got to happen is the line to snap and you to no longer have rear brakes.
All right, so everything is done. You can see our passenger side's pointed down as well. Put all the clips in. We've got all the slack going towards the back now as well on the other side. And then all you got to do is make sure it's torqued here. Torque your top nuts. If you want, hit it with some brake cleaner. Just get the brakes fluid off of like rubber and stuff like that. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. It'll wash off as you drive. One thing to note, when you're bleeding the back, because it is only this tiny little line all the way back here, when you're pumping, you're not going to get as much brake fluid coming out as you would on the front. So you'll pump and pump and pump, and you'll only get a couple bubbles coming out and not that much fluid. It is normal. Push on the brake pedal really hard. It'll come out. You'll get it all out. But don't expect it to come out like a waterfall or anything like that. And if you want to know how well this type of braided line lasts, Richard actually put a set on his Jeep here. You can see it comes down right here, tucks around, and bolts onto the caliper right there. So his are holding up awesome, no issues with them. Looks exactly the same line. The one nicer thing with his Jeep is the top nut is way bigger. The little 10 mil to get off on the Frontier, bit of a pain in the butt. Again, you probably want to crack it with pliers, but other than that, not too bad of a job. All right, so there you go. Everything's done. Get your wheels back on, torque them back down. It's 100 foot-pounds when you're torquing it down. Make sure your reservoir is full. Put the cap back on. Don't lose any of that. And again, we only used a small portion. You can see in the pan here, it's not much. This thing, maybe, I don't know, third, maybe a half of it was used. But again, you're not going to get as much from the front or the back as you will in the front. And that's about it. Make sure your lines stay away from everything. So if the video helped you out, like and subscribe. Go check out Ghostly Rich's channel. He'll have all his version of this stuff, plus everything else we did on the truck as well. And you can check out more there.